Something.
This is
Something.
working.
Something.
It's working.
That's good. I'm glad. I'm glad that's working, Jack.
Yeah, so once we get him on the call, we'll just make sure that all the audio is good. We'll do an intro, and then I'll do a cut, and we'll come back with him on the call. You know?
Okay. So, what do you want me to do? Are we doing it? So treat me as if I'm like a 5-year-old, which isn't that uncommon for you
We're
in our relationship.
we're
Anyway,
we're gonna do the intro.
we're doing the intro. Is this the intro right now?
Well,
All right.
it can start whenever I say it starts.
Well, you
Phenomenal
are
cosmic power.
right. You are the editor. So, what episode are we on?
Uh, Video episode 1.
Video episode 1, but we're stripping. But are we ripping the audio for a podcast too?
Yeah, yeah. So
doing?
I think we'd be at 165. I lost count. You know, Apple actually hates it when you number the episodes now.
Do they?
Yeah, it fucks with the
I have
rankings. It fucks
So
with
we're
the
just
rankings, so nobody really pays attention anymore.
So we just go with guests then, as against a number. Is that what you're saying?
I mean, yeah, there's really I like putting the numbers on there. I find them helpful, and I'm sure a bunch of people who are on Adderall appreciate it too. But
Yeah.
you know.
Okay. So we're
Yes,
not gonna go
165. We're
You know what,
audio
we-
episode 165, video episode 1. Naked Diner 164, colon.
Cold.
Video episode 1, The Revengeing.
The Revengeing. Very good. So we are on 164,
165.
165, 1. And you know what? This will be a good way to let people know that there is an audio only.
Is not their only
version.
option anymore. They can go
And for
find us
people-
on the YouTubes.
And they could find us on the YouTubes too.
Yeah.
You want to do the intro? You want to start?
No, you should start.
All right. Hey, everybody. This is Andy Hall of the Naked Diner podcast. Maybe the Naked Diner show, too. I don't know how we're going to name our YouTube show, Jack Matirko. Is it still a podcast, or is this a show?
Podcast,
Or-
video. What was the word? I used the phrase webisode or webishow with
What?
Des the other day. Yeah.
I like that.
Webishow?
I have my-
Webishow? Welcome to our Webishow.
Right. So if you're listening to the podcast audio only, this is episode 165. And hey, if this is the video version, this is our first show that you get to see Jack. And unfortunately, you get to see me too, to tell you the truth, and all the funny faces that I make. And I got my pointy pen right here.
Oh, good.
That
I'm glad you have a prop.
I have a prop. So our guest today is YouTuber extraordinaire Steve Shives. Steve, great guy, has over 100,000 subs to his YouTube channel, does a variety of different types.
Has gone through a bit of an
Episode?
evolution over the years.
And I want to talk to him about that too, because whenever you're talking to someone who works in a particular medium, the medium changes at times, the marketplace changes. And so we might talk about the business of YouTube, but I think we'll probably talk about Star Trek too.
I think it's really funny that because Steve Shives started out about the same time that we all started doing internet media of one kind or another. We're all
Yeah.
somewhere in that last half of Obama presidency,
Yeah.
or of his first term kind of thing, you know.
Yeah. Yeah. We run in basically the same liberal secular circles, I think.
And for the last almost
Our-
10 years, we've enjoyed talking about atheism and Star Trek an awful lot. Star Trek comes up a bunch in atheist circles in ways that I don't really understand. It's kind of magical.
What you get to ask? Wait, I'll use my pen. You get to ask him all about that, Jack.
Oh, I have a good Star Trek question. I really do. I've been thinking about it.
Okay. Oh, good. So that's our guest. Let's talk about what we're doing in the world. How is Satan? How's Satan?
Well, I don't know if you saw on Halloween, the Satanic Temple launched their TST TV streaming service at thesatanictemple.tv.
I saw the episode, a very strong episode. Who is your host?
Stu DeHaan.
Or co-host? Stu.
Stu, we know Stu.
He,
Stu's a good guy.
he knows Stu. Yeah, he's a
Yeah,
lawyer.
he's co-hosting that with me, and I'm gonna do a thing for them where I do a bunch of individual one-on-one interviews, like half-hour one-on-ones. I got a bunch of people lined up for that. That'll be fun.
Excellent. So is that going to be in a video format also?
Yeah, that's going to be video over there. I think the way they've got it, I don't want to get into all the weird numbers and math of it, but it's going to be, they've got subscription and they've got pay-as-you-go video on demand, all of that stuff. Yeah.
So let's talk about the show that you and Stu did. What's the name of the show?
Devil's Dispatch, which is going to be basically just a news show, you know. Once every 2 weeks, we're going to sit down and say, hey, here's all the stuff that's been going on with everybody all over the place, so you don't have to stay glued to Facebook for 12 hours a day just to keep up.
So what I'm hearing you saying, if you want concentrated Satan,
and if you just want to be like, I need my bi-weekly dose of what's going on with the Satanic Temple, that's the one for you. If you want to follow the weird stuff, like the dudes in Chicago are doing a show where they play Dungeons and Dragons, kind of like a Harmontown-y, or what's Vin Diesel's one? You know the kind of shows I mean, or Posehn. Yeah. Posehn's got a really good gaming podcast like that. So, you know, they're going to take a stab at doing that. And I've met those guys up in Chicago. They're good people. It should be a lot of fun. They're very funny.
What I liked about your show is that you had a lot of people calling in, or a lot of guests that came on to talk about what.
Yeah, you didn't see the whole live stream because it cut behind the paywall. Or no, it was you didn't see the live stream, but you'd have to subscribe to watch it now. But yeah, it was cool. Like, we bounced from the show that me and Stu did right into stuff over at Salem. And then they went back to Stu's house live that night where he was hanging out with Chalise and Sarah. And they did more stuff and had more people call in live. It was really neat.
You know, I just wanted to say that what I appreciate about you and Stu is that you use the motherfucking word bi-weekly correctly. You're not
It's not
saying
twice a week. It's once every 2 weeks.
It's not twice. It's once every 2 weeks. Because that is bi-weekly.
I'm glad you have very strong opinions about that.
I think
I understand, because I get bent out of shape about 2 spaces after a period. There's that one thing that really just drives me up a wall.
That's a sign of age, my friend.
I know. It's because of typewriters.
Oh, yeah. When I went to high school back in the day, in the long ago, I learned on an electric typewriter, and it was always 2 spaces. It was a habit.
Yeah, it became standardized at 1 space after the invention of variable width font, because I'm a nerd.
That's good. I did not know that. And now variable width font. That does make sense. I learned something today. Thank you, Jack.
You're welcome. Glad I could help. So anyway, our guest is Steve Shives.
Yeah. And we should have a good time.
We should have a good time talking to him. And like Andy said, if you want to check out the Satan goings on, hop over there, because I'm going to be dumping a bunch of stuff of content over there.
You're doing a Satan dump.
Satan dump, yeah.
Satan dump. I'm sure that's some kind of subgenre of porn, to tell you the truth. But that's
quite
a whole
possibly.
And
you know what? That might be available on that site too. Who knows? Could go anywhere.
You guys got a little Satan asylum going on over there. With all
there's going to be some
and foolery there, Tom.
Yeah, there's a bit of it. Like, since I'm already set up with the podcasting and stuff, I'm able to get a bunch of guests from outside of TST really quick, and I'm doing that. Yeah. And now it's kind of starting to feel like, oh, I'm the carnival barker leading people into just chaos.
That's good. That's a good position to be in. And you know, so I know people are asking themselves right now, how much does Satan cost on the TV? How much does that cost?
The Devil's Dispatch episodes, I know they're putting up for $2.99 an episode. I'm putting my one-on-one interviews up at $1.99 an episode. But a monthly subscription is $10 a month, so you can do that math however you want. If I've got 3 out of 12 episodes that you want to watch, pay for the month and binge and see what else is on there, go right ahead. That makes total sense to me. It's what I'd do.
You know, $10 a month.
It's not bad.
It's a good deal.
It's not bad for for the amount of content that everybody plans on putting out.
Well, the thing is, what you can say many things about the temple, but from my experience of the temple, a lot of really talented artists of many types.
Yes.
And many media.
Yes. Broadly defined artist.
Yes, you got to play loose with that term, but I feel comfortable with that. You could have Satan flower arrangements. I mean, I don't know. Maybe that's a thing. Maybe it isn't. I'm not sure.
I suppose it's possible. I don't know. That'd be funny. I'd like to see like somebody do like a satanic morning show from like 10 p.m. to 3 in the morning. like Good Morning America, but you do it in the middle of the night.
That would either be really crazy or maybe not. It's like the Magical Mystery Tour.
I mean, you know, what do third shift workers watch when they wake up in the morning, you know?
That's a good question. I don't know. But so you're saying that would serve a very important demographic for people who are just up at that time of night.
People who are just waking up then and getting their shit together and they just want something on the TV. Seems to me that, you know.
On the TV. Well, apparently you can get Satan on TV, so that's great. You'd
have to ask around about that. I don't know. I'm not sure who I would have to ask if there's going to set up something on Roku or whatever. They might, I assume.
You should congratulate me on not being as fat. I don't know. Most people, now you've seen me every once in a while, so I don't know if you've been able to see that my face looks more like an egg than like a fat.
I was going to say, you know, you
yeah.
I'm thinking,
well,
you need to like cosplay as old man version of the Doctor and Powerpuff Girls.
Oh yeah, well I look like any generic middle-aged white kid. Or you know, unfortunately Trump supporter, or you know, any one of those type of people. But yeah, I do have that look. For better or for worse.
I mean, it's nothing you can do about it, really.
I was going to say I was going to be drinking today, but I decided not to.
Yeah, that was a smart move.
So this is just coffee. I can't really promise what's going to happen in other episodes.
Right. Okay.
I think that's a good place.
Yeah, I think that's a good place to just cut here, and we'll be right back after, I don't know, I'll throw some nonsense in, and then we'll be back with Steve Shives.
Like nonsense.
Monsters on the radio dial. We are the devils now. So this is the dream. All close up. It's not bad, but it's not rushed. 23 hours.
How are you?
So far, so good.
Yeah,
we'll see.
Everything's. Yeah, I'll let you know in a couple hours after I go through the tape, right? So.
So Steve, you know, there's like a million ways we can start talking about your YouTube channel, about your that. But I thought one question would be a good way to open everything up, and we could probably just spin off this for the next, couple of days if we really wanted to. But tell me, is being a Star Trek fan a political statement?
It's more of a political statement than I used to think it was. Well, it depends on who you're talking to. There are some Star Trek fans I have discovered since I started talking about it a lot more on my YouTube channel that don't. Let's just put it this way: they don't see it the same way I do in terms of its politics. Like I watch Star Trek and I see it as, and in terms of its politics, it is imperfect, but it is fairly blatantly progressive. And there are lots of folks who I have had contact with through my YouTube channel who either don't think that it is that way or acknowledge that it is that way, but have not taken on board any of that, who are perfectly happy to just totally ignore the political side, which I don't really get. But
or make your case why, and I agree with you, sir. I just want to say now, I do not think Star Trek is some kind of libertarian utopia. But tell me why Star Trek is a progressive, has progressive morals.
Well, the most obvious argument for it is that it's self-consciously baked into the DNA of the franchise. Like the guy who created Star Trek, Gene Roddenberry, intentionally cast the show with a racially diverse cast. He intentionally wanted to have women on the bridge of the Starship. He wanted to present an image of a future society where its inequalities in terms of gender and in terms of race. And that's not just something that just happened by accident. Like, he intended message. He wanted to show audiences in the 60s, in the midst of the civil rights movement, Vietnam War, and all of these other really, really urgent social problems. He wanted to show them, hey, when we get past all of this division and all of this prejudice, we could have a pretty cool future. And that's a willful message that he was sending. And every other iteration of the series since then has adopted that. Like, every other show and every other movie has carried that forward and tried to have racially diverse casting, and tried to, with varying degrees of success, tried to put women in prominent roles, and tried to tell stories that were obvious social allegories, that were telling the audience, racism is bad, sexism is bad, xenophobia, paranoia against immigrants and people who are different than you is a bad thing. You should try to overcome that. So I feel like it's just like, it's difficult to try and make a case for it, because to me it's just right out there.
Yeah.
Like, and how do you miss?
Right. I remember watching an episode of The Next Generation, which was all about torture.
Yeah.
I think it was Jean-Luc who was captured, and they wanted, his captors wanted, or torturers, and they wanted, there were only
hold
two
up
lights.
a second. I'm getting some video lag in the recording.
Uh-oh.
Yeah, well, hang on. I think I can fix it. I'll just have to put a weird cut somewhere. All right. Yeah, I think it's back. Yeah, I just needed to transition away for a sec. Reset.
All right.
All right.
That's
So
fine.
anyway, the three lights.
So I would think that is pretty clearly anti-torture. That the message there is, you shouldn't be torturing people, and this was way before waterboarding or stress positions.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. So tell me about what the people say. That what do they think? Do they think that Star Trek is basically neutral? It has nothing to say?
I've gotten comments from people who say, stop bringing politics into it, which is very weird for a show as overtly political as Star Trek. I think a lot of folks who have that opinion, and it seems, I don't know, my judgment is that it is a vocal minority of the fan base, but those folks are definitely there. And either they genuinely just don't get it, like even as blatant and as heavy-handed as it is, like, it somehow just goes over their heads. They just don't get the political side. Or they read other things into it. Like, there's another really overtly political TNG episode that I'm referenced in one of my recent videos called "The Outcast," that is a fairly blatant argument against homophobia, and nowadays could also be read as an argument against transphobia. And it's fairly obvious what the message of the show is, that this kind of prejudice against people because of their sexuality is bad, and it's harmful, and it's tragic. And I got a comment from someone saying, well, the nice thing about that episode is they let the viewer make up their own mind. And I thought, like, what show did you watch? How do it has this really heavy-handed, tragic ending where this character is made to suffer this terrible fate because of their gender and their sexuality, and it's pretty clear we're being led to conclude like this is a bad result. This is a tragic thing. Like a person's life has been destroyed because of this prejudice that she faces on her planet. And someone watches that episode and goes, "Yeah, they're pulling back and letting you make up your own mind." Like how like how obvious do you have to make it before you get like, no, you're supposed to be on her side. You're not supposed to think, yeah, but you could see the other side of it too. Okay, like I don't really see that, but so I think some of it is like a lot of it is people just honestly don't they honestly miss what I think is the intended point of the show. But I mean, there are people who read things into, like you mentioned before, like there are people who view it as a libertarian show. They say, hey, the government in Star Trek is very hands off and people are allowed to do whatever they want. And it's like, yeah, because all the social problems have been solved. Yeah. Like there's no need for a government in those situations because there's no racism, there's no sexism, like there's nothing holding anybody back. And by the way, there's also no money. So there's no class
This
prejudice.
brings me to one of my weird conjectures about this show, because they never show. Okay, so you figure teleporters have to, or the replicators, they have to work from some bulk matter unit, right?
You would think.
So the ship is a sealed system. There has to be some sort of reclamation process involved, right? So they never show the guy who has to fix when the matter reclamation unit in the bathroom breaks. They never show that guy. It would be O'Brien, but they never show that guy.
It would have to be O'Brien. There's a reference to it very, very sort of indirectly in Deep Space Nine a few times. They refer to, I forget what they call it. It's some kind of like euphemism. They call it like waste extraction or something.
Right.
And you could interpret that as just general waste, but it could also be people's waste. And, but that's as close as they get to even acknowledging. But yeah, you're right. It is like a ship or a space station is a closed system, and you think they would have to recycle everything. So,
they would have to. Yeah.
So the one takeaway from this episode
is someone's got a shitty job fixing the crap replicator.
I think you're burying the lead here. In fact, people are eating crap.
Yeah, we actually had a joke about that in one of the early episodes of the Star Trek comedy podcast that I co-host with my buddy Jason Harding, where we play characters who are supposedly living on the Enterprise during the TOS era, and my character brings up the fact that I mean, they recycle everything. So the food and the water, like that, like the water used to be pee, that, right? And the other guy, his character is sort of like, oh, don't say that. Don't talk about it. It just makes him uncomfortable to even
it's kind of a step removed once you get into replicators and stuff, though, because you're breaking everything down into just bulk matter.
Right.
So it's kind of whatever,
Yeah, well, that's what I said. I said, it's just molecules, man. It's not, don't worry about it.
Just calling back to the people who don't see that Star Trek has a liberal progressive bias. There are some people that are now just thinking about poo. Whatever
Exactly.
Characters are eating, they're saying, I do not accept this. And that bulk matter has to go somewhere on the ship. It's some kind of goo, maybe. But feces, no, sir. I cannot accept that.
That's not the future I want.
That's probably the most dystopian future aspect of the Star Trek universe.
Absolutely.
So, Steve, tell us more about the channel in general.
Oh, sure.
Star Trek.
Yeah. I mean, I started talking more regularly about Star Trek a couple years ago, and it's been a very nice thing for me. But I've been doing YouTube for about 10 years. Just sort of gradually clawing my way up. I just recently crossed 100,000 subscribers, which means I'm officially the lowest tier of YouTube big shot now. So thank you very much.
I did notice that you hit
I'm the least big deal now. So thank you very much. But yeah, I started talking about. That's still a part of who I am, and it's still, something that comes in every once in a while when it's relevant. A series about Christian apologetics books called An Atheist Reads, where I would read like a book by Strobel or uh, William Lane Craig or something, and break it down. I disagreed with it, and then I also talk about politics and current events and things like that. So it's a very eclectic channel. Like now that I get a lot of views for the Star Trek videos, I get comments from people. Some people really like it. They're like, "Oh, I watched you for Star Trek, and then I noticed you talk about politics too. How cool!" And then there are other people who are exactly the opposite, who are like, "Oh God, I just wanted to watch Star Trek videos about politics." So it's been very interesting. But that's one of the things I like about my channel, is that it's very eclectic. I never quite picked a thing and said, okay, it's going to just be this. Like, I like having a variety of things to talk about because it keeps things interesting for me. I don't get bored out of my mind. Like, oh God, I really don't want to talk about Star Trek today.
Because how often do you post? How many videos?
Either 2 or 3 videos a week. It depends on the week. Some weeks I don't do a video on Monday, but I do a video on Wednesday and Friday. I always do a video Wednesday and Friday, and every other week I'll also do a Monday video, which is usually my video that's focused on current events. Yeah, so and Wednesdays is the Star Trek video, or sometimes like a video essay about something else. And then Friday is my series Steve and Stuffy, which is like a comedy series with me and stuffed animals having it's a stuffed animal sitcom soap opera type thing, and it's a lot of fun. But
I saw a couple of videos about with the Stuffy crew.
Yeah,
very funny stuff, dude.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, those are my favorites. I wish those got more views, but
it's always
the way.
Every single artist that you talk to, they'll be like, this is my favorite. This is probably the most creative thing I do.
Yeah.
Yet nobody appreciates it, or very few. Not as many people appreciate it as other stuff.
Yeah, but it's fine. Like I put my everything I have into all the videos I make. So the fact that like people really like this, I'm grateful that anybody pays any attention to me at all. I'm grateful that anybody watches any of my videos and has anything nice to say about it. So the fact that people are like, oh, the Star Trek videos get, I don't know, 100 times the attention as the Stuffy videos. Like it may bother me a little bit because I think, oh, but I work so hard on the Stuffy, and I think they're so good. I'm incredibly fortunate to even be sitting here talking to you, to even be someone who's done anything that enough people have noticed that anybody says, oh, we should talk to him.
When you transitioned from doing a lot of talking about atheism and stuff into the more talking about Star Trek and whatnot, that was right around when you kind of just got like hammered on by a whole bunch of crazy right-wing assholes. And is it just that like I'm burned out on the topic, no matter how much I still like it and it matters to me? I just can't, I can't do that week after week after week.
You know what? That's never really been a huge problem. I mean, there have been times when I've been burned out on the community, when I've been burned out on the atheist community, and I've thought, oh God, just to hell with this. But I've never to the point that I thought I'm just not going to talk about it anymore, And like there have been times several years ago when I was really getting hammered by people who were making videos about me and talking about what a horrible person I am. And, some of that really sucked, but it never was to the point where I was like, okay, I'm going to stop talking about this, or I'm going to stop making videos about this. I kind of moved away from the atheist stuff because I felt like I had just said everything that I had to say. And when I think of something else to say, or if there's a topic that I feel like I have something useful or worth hearing to say, I mean, I'll make that video. I still talk about it, but it's not a regular thing. Like I did when I ended the Atheist Reads series, which had been sort of my flagship atheist content for a long time. I said a year in advance, I said at the beginning of the last year, I said, this will be my last year. And I did 3 more books and then I ended it. And I said, it's because I just don't want to keep repeating myself to the point that I hate doing this. I think I ended up doing like, I did 25 series that I did. I did 25 series and more than 25 books, because some of the series were more than one book. But I read so much literature about, from Christian apologists and from creationists and, people who were young earth creationists and people who made all these arguments in favor of Christianity or against other religions or against atheism. And I felt like they were repeating themselves. I felt like I had read the same book 3 or 4 times, and that they were just basically rewriting each other's stuff.
And presumably the critiques that you got from the joys of the YouTube comment section started to get extremely repetitive after a while, I'm sure.
Oh, sure. Yeah. Because there are only, the argument itself, the big arguments that used to occupy a lot of my time between religious folks and atheists haven't really changed at all in the time that I've been paying attention. Particular things will crop up. Like there might be a particular incident that you could argue about, like a few years ago when, it was, should the guy who owns the bakery be allowed to discriminate against the gay couple who want to buy a wedding cake from him? And a lot of atheists and secular people got involved in that because they said, you shouldn't be able to use your religious beliefs as an excuse to discriminate against people. So things like that would happen. But in terms of the big issues of creation versus evolution and how old is the earth and should we teach science in science class or should we teach pseudoscience in science class as long as there's a religious label on it or whatever, like those were all the same. And yeah, the response, like my opinions never really changed that fundamentally. And the responses never really change. So at a certain point, it's like, I've done this work and it's still there. Anybody who wants to watch those videos can watch them. And people still watch them and still comment on them. And I think that's great. But it's like, it's there and it's done.
Yeah, I think, I think
that's all I have to say.
The way I tend to think about it is like engaging in those kinds of conversations at this point. It's not like having a conversation. It's like playing chess. Like you both know what all your moves are.
Yeah, for sure. That's a great way to describe it. Exactly. And it's not that it can't be fun or rewarding to do from time to time. And and if the right person approached me like in private and wanted to talk about that kind of stuff, it's not like I would automatically blow them off. But in terms of like making videos or making public things to say, here, this is what I do, this is who I am, like I've done all that. And I can't think of one of the interesting challenges in the last couple of years of the Atheist Read series was trying to figure out creative ways of responding to arguments I had already responded to 3 and 4 times before. And that was one of the things that kind of kept me interested the last few years, was thinking, okay, I can't make that analogy. Yeah, I can't make that analogy because I already did that. So how else could I make the same point without just saying the exact same thing? But even that, eventually you're like, I'm going to run out of these at some point, you know?
Yeah. Tell me a time that you changed someone's mind.
Oh, well, I got an email recently from someone who apparently, I don't know if I can take credit for changing their mind, but they were someone who had a very, very negative opinion of me from years back, from I guess when somebody had made like a response video to me or something and had been mad because I supported feminism or I supported, LGBTQ equality or whatever. I forget whatever it was, whatever their problem with me was. And this person wrote me a really nice email saying, that I've come around and I've changed since then, and I just wanted to, let you know. And it was a really sweet email, and I felt like kind of a jerk because I didn't remember them. Like they felt really bad about having like attacked me or left a nasty comment or something. And apparently this was something that they were still sort of carrying around with them. And they sent me this really nice email, and I felt like a jerk because I was like, I'm sorry. I don't even remember you, but thank you for saying that. I've gotten comments from people who claimed that, they watched one of my atheist videos and it got them to look at things a different way, or it got them to, maybe examine the evidence for evolution that they hadn't looked at, or got them to see things in a different way. Like, because sometimes a lot of what I did was just try to explain why I had the opinion that I had, instead of trying to have like an argument and say, here's why you're wrong. I would just try to say, okay, well, here's why I disagree with this. And if someone says, well, for instance, I don't think evolution happened because there are no transitional species, I would try to explain like, well, okay, maybe you have a different concept of what a transitional fossil looks like as opposed to what a biologist would. And here's what they think. And, that's why it was persuasive to me. So, I mean, I think I've maybe contributed to changing a few people's minds here and there, which I'm grateful for, but I've always said like that's not my primary goal. Like if I do that, I think that's great. But I feel like there are other people who are better at that, who are better at engaging with people with the intention of turning someone. And I've never had the knack for that or the patience for that. Like I like having conversations with people. I like and a rapport. Like I'm interested in knowing like why do you think, if we have why did you come to the conclusion you came to? Help me to understand that. And my approach, not, let me try to figure out how I can prove you wrong and get you to agree with me. It was more like a nice person. You seem like we could get along. We disagree on this thing. Well, why do you think what you think?
Sure. And sometimes just having a person state what they think is a way for that person to realize, oh, maybe I'm a bit wrong, or maybe my thinking isn't completely valid or logical on this particular subject.
Or I mean, eventually, ideally, you come to a place where it's like, we disagree on this, but that's okay. We can still do all this other stuff together, and that doesn't really get in each other's way. And like, that's the ideal. Yeah.
Well, and I know the times that my mind has been changed on things. It was the sort of thing that you were just describing. Like someone they're not trying to change your mind. They just put something to you and you're like, oh, like I remember a few years ago, I was someone, I can't remember if they left a comment on a video or if they reached out to me privately, but it was, I had made a joke in a video, and the joke, the targets of the joke were people who were being transphobic. So I was trying to do like a good thing. I was trying to make fun of transphobic people, but the language that I used transphobic language in the joke. Like I was like speaking how one of them would speak. I used the T word, right?
Yeah, I understand.
And this person reached out to me and they said, you don't do that with any other slurs. Like, because I said the actual word, and they said, when you're making fun of racists, you don't use the N word. When you're making fun of homophobes, you don't use the F slur. Why did you use the T word that time? And I thought, wow, they're right. I realized like, yeah, that's a blind spot. Like I should have tried to make the same joke or make the same point without using the word. And, and that's happened a couple of times where people have just not tried to argue, not trying to make me feel like a jerk, but just saying, you don't do this in this situation. So why did you do it in this situation? And letting me get the rest of the way myself, and I changed and I was like, yeah, you're right. I shouldn't do that anymore. So sometimes that can be very effective.
Has anyone ever made a comment that got you angry and then you stepped away from it, thought about it, and said, well, maybe there were...
Yeah, sure. Yeah. Before I had as much experience going through the thing I just described, because like now that I've had to do it a few times, I kind of just accept that that's part of being a person who, wants to be sensitive and wants to like try to be willing to change. Now that I've had to go through it a few times, I'm a little more open to it. But the first couple times it happened, someone would make a comment about something and maybe I would get defensive and I would get accusatory and I'd say, hey, wait a minute, I didn't mean it like that. Like I'm on your side and blah, blah, blah. And then I would come back and think, wait a minute. Yeah, they're right. Like there was another, again, it had to do with using insensitive language. I used the C word in something, and a friend of mine contacted me and said, I don't think you should use that word. And she explained like why she felt that word was very hurtful and demeaning to her. And at the time I went into like defensive mode and I was like, well, look, I didn't mean it that way. And I wasn't trying to attack you and I wasn't trying to insult you. And eventually I regretted dealing with her that way because I felt like, she was right. You know, I should have been more, I should have listened, and I should, because eventually I did decide to stop using that word. You know, I decided, like, and it, off of what she said, it was a bunch of other things piled up, and I started to realize, oh, like, I'm the one being the jerk. Like, I'm the one who needs to change. Another situation where I at the time, I don't know if I wasn't necessarily angry at her, but I was exasperated because I felt sure that I was in the right. I was like, she's got this all wrong. Not, she's upset about something right the first time. I should have work on, I'm going to find a different word next time, you know.
You make an interesting point about the nature of personal change, is that it can take a long time, typically like several variables that can affect a person to make them change their mind.
Yeah, absolutely. It doesn't always take the first time, you know.
Oh,
Yeah, and it's, I know from, all I've told people is, you know, when I have changed in the past, that I have never regretted it. You know, like when I have, because I used to do a YouTube series, one of my relatively more popular series. It used to be called Five Stupid Things, and someone reached out to me. Actually, a friend of mine worked on me for years and said, you know, you shouldn't use that word because a lot of people are, that hurts people's feelings. It's considered ableist by a lot of people, and you should find a different word. And eventually, after years of wearing me down, I eventually realized, I was like, you know what, I'm not comfortable using that word like that anymore. I'm gonna change the title of the series. And I did that, and I felt a lot better about it. And I've never regretted not, you know, when you have to take a word out of your vocabulary, or you have to, remind yourself to not have a certain attitude, or take a certain viewpoint, or not get defensive about something or whatever. Like, sometimes it's difficult and it's not comfortable, but I personally have never ever felt sorry. Like, I've never felt like, oh man, I wish I hadn't, you know, God, I wish I could say that word. You know what I mean? Like, I've never felt like it was time poorly spent.
sure. So I'm going to say a word.
Okay.
May not be a topic that you talk a lot about on your channel. Jack and I, we have pretty much a center left to far left viewership.
Okay.
And so you can say whatever you want about this word. And the word is, as you can probably guess, Trump.
Oh, I do talk about that on my channel from time to time, actually. Yeah. Oh God. Well, I mean, where do you even start? Like, I don't know. Okay, I'll tell you this story. I was one of the cocky white male left-leaning jerks before the 2016 election who was absolutely sure he was going to lose, and was like, I was so excited. I was like, I mean, I voted for Bernie Sanders in my primary that year, but I was happy to vote for Hillary. Like, I was not like an anti-Hillary Clinton person. I was like, so I voted for Clinton in the election, and I was like, this is going to be such a great day. Hillary Clinton's going to win, and we're going to have the first woman president, and Trump's going to lose, and it's going to be great. And then that night, when it became clear that Trump was going to win, I was getting text messages from people who were like crying, who were afraid, who didn't know if they were going to be okay with Trump as president.
Buried somewhere, I have audio of me and Andy doing a Skype call during the results coming in. I think I know we got very drunk, which is why it never aired. Things just got bad after like Pennsylvania flipped.
Oh, it was awful. It was awful. And it was a wake up call for me, because after that happened, I think like the next day I was talking to people, and I was talking to some friends of mine, and I had like black friends who were like, it's not a surprise to us. And I was talking, there were women that I knew who were like, it's not a surprise to us. Like, we saw this coming the whole time. And I realized how rose-colored my glasses had been. Like, I used to think like, well, I can see the problems in this country. I know all about police brutality and, you know, racial inequality in the criminal justice system, and this, and, you know, gender inequality. I'm aware of all of this, but I genuinely thought that things were going to be okay, that the election was going to be fine. And then this huge bucket of cold water over the top of my head, where I had to be like, oh my God, like, things are just so much worse than I thought they would be. And then you start going through your personal life and seeing like people in your family who voted for him. And you're like, why? How could you possibly? After the Access Hollywood tape, how could you vote for him? After saying he would ban Muslims, how could you vote for him? You know, after he mocked the reporter who had the disability, like how could you, how could you do that? And it was just a wake up call. And it's gotten worse since then, which is the shocking part. Like it's election day. I look back on that and I think, wow, as upset as I was, I had no idea how bad it was going to get. You know, it's been horrible. It's been absolutely horrible.
Do you feel comfortable talking about some of the conversations you've had with family members who voted for Trump?
I'll tell you, the one that I remember the most was when I found out that a family member didn't vote for him, and I was so incredibly relieved. I talked to my dad right near the election. It was either right before or right after, and I didn't bring up the subject because my dad is fairly conservative. You know, he's registered Republican, but he also he surprised me once by saying that he did not like Ronald Reagan like at all because Reagan was against working people,
Kind of one of those,
which is true.
kind of like one of those Goldwater guys.
Yeah, kind of. My dad, he has very he's very pro-labor, very pro-working class, but at the same time, he's also like very anti-taxes and socially pretty conservative. So he usually falls mostly to the right. And so I didn't bring up the topic at all. Like if he voted for Trump, I just didn't want to know. And he brought it up. He said, who'd you vote for? And I said, I voted for Clinton. And I sort of gritted my teeth and said, well, who did you vote for? You know, like sort of bracing myself. And I think he told me that he didn't vote for anybody in the presidential election. He voted like for senator and for our state representatives, but he just left the president thing blank because he wasn't a fan of Hillary Clinton, and he didn't want to vote like for a third party. He didn't want to vote for Gary Johnson or anything like that. And he didn't want to vote for Trump either because he said Trump is a bully and he's full of hot air. And I was like, oh, thank God. Like I don't have to deal with, oh God, my father voted for Trump, but yeah, there have been, there was an incident, and I'm gonna speak about this very generally. There was an incident recently where someone in my extended family died, and we had their funeral, and then afterwards, someone told me that before the funeral or before the viewing, before the service, where there was an open casket, there was conflict between the family members, between like the kids, as to whether or not they should have her Trump 2020 gold pin visible like on her clothes while she was laying in the coffin. And I thought, God, I wish I hadn't heard that. Like, I wish that that you just hadn't told me about that, because it totally changes everything about the way you see the person. And it wasn't someone that I was like super close with, but it was someone in my family and someone who I had a positive interaction with, and thought well of, and was sorry that they were gone. And then all of a sudden it's like, oh, what do I do with this now? Like, now what am I supposed to do? It's like when in one of Mark Maron's stand-up specials, he talks about like finding out that someone close to you voted for Trump, and his reaction is, "Well, now I've got a decision to make." Like, what am I supposed to do with you? And it's exactly like that. It's you do this math in your head of like, okay, how important is this person to me? How close are they to me? Is keeping them in my life important enough that I just have to overlook this? Because otherwise,
I have a close friend. He's my hide the body friend. I've known him for about 25 years or so, and he's conservative. And the only time we talk politics is when we're both drinking, and he pretty much blacks out, I think, at some point. And I might brown out certain areas. So that's how we make it work, to tell you the truth.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, because sometimes people ask me, because they have the incredibly false impression that because I have a a somewhat popular YouTube channel, I'm a good person to ask advice for stuff, which is completely false. Please don't anybody ever do that. But they say like, what should you do if you have a close friend or a family member who, it's not just you have a political disagreement here and there, but there's like this fundamental philosophical difference where you don't see any way past it. And the only thing I can say is if this person is important enough to you to keep in your life, and it's just going to be a huge fight every time you bring it up, you just have to find ways to not bring it up.
Pick a sport and talk about that for the rest of your lives.
Yeah, exactly. And it sucks. It's a terrible way to have a relationship with someone, but that's the only way I can see past it, because I know there are people in my family now that if the subject comes up, it's just going to get ugly. Like I'm not going to be able to have it not get ugly, and I don't want that to happen. So we just don't talk about it.
So we're recording this episode in November.
Yeah.
Holidays are coming up. Do you have a game plan besides just not talking about it? Or Thanksgiving dinner? Are you going to white knuckle it?
If it comes to that, yeah. Thankfully, our Thanksgiving gatherings are relatively small. My side of the family, there's usually only about 5 or 6 of us. It's just like immediate family, and for me, it's been that way since I was a little kid. When my wife and I first got together and I started to go to her family's holiday dinners and there was like 50 people there, I was like, what is this? How does anybody enjoy this? Because I was used to it was me and my brother and my parents and our grandparents on my dad's side. And like, that was it. Like that was our holiday dinners. And I thought it was great. And now it's basically the same thing. A few people have left, there's been a divorce and a few people have died, but it's like a small group of us. So that's usually not a problem. We all get along pretty well. But for the bigger family gatherings, yeah, it's basically just, just sit, eat the food, smile politely, chat, chit chat with people if they want to talk, and yeah, white knuckle it. Just okay, we're just here for a few hours and then we can go and we can complain about it in the car,
Well, when you're creative, I imagine everything. There's the common saying that everything is material.
Oh yeah. Yeah, sure. I mean, the problem is that the recipient of my best material is usually my wife, and it's her family that I'm complaining about, and that like that gets old real quick, and I'm sympathetic to that too. It's like, I don't want to just like be unloading on all these people that she grew up with. But yeah, it's tough. Like I know there are people who are in way tougher situations than I am, who have to deal with it, who have people in their lives who they can't just get rid of or who they don't want to get rid of.
Sure.
But they feel like they've been exposed to this side of them that they never imagined was there before. And it's tough, it's really difficult,
Yeah. Did you grow up in a secular home?
I grew up we were nominally religious. We were Christian, mostly Christian in name only. There was a few months when I was about 6 that we did go to church. That didn't last very long. My dad
Easter.
wasn't. Yeah. We lasted from like one Christmas through Easter, and that was it. Literally, it was like very short. I got like I think I got a children's illustrated
from
Bible
there, it's
as
just
an
the same
Easter
story
gift.
every year over and over again. So,
I've heard it. Yeah, like okay, the wise men came, the baby was born. I got it. I mean, but so Dad wasn't really a church going type, so we didn't go after about less than a year. I'm pretty sure. My mom's family was very religious. My grandfather on my mom's side was a preacher and had like his own church for a while, but we were never really super close with them because them and my dad didn't get along for some reason. My dad, who never went to church, didn't get along with his preacher father-in-law. But so we were Christians, but we were never super religious. And I remember there was a time when my mom's dad came to visit, and because he was very religious, before he left, he led us all in a prayer, and we all went along with it. But I remember sort of looking around and thinking, like, we don't do this, like we never do this. There was never like, we all sort of believed in God, and it was presumed that like the Christian worldview was generally true, but we never prayed, we never said grace at meals, we, except for that time I mentioned, we never went to church. And so when my grandfather was like, okay, I'm gonna go, let's all pray, and it was weird because it was like, we don't do this. And eventually I just kind of grew out of it. Like when I became a teenager, I thought, well, maybe there's a God, but I don't really think the Christian thing is true, or at least that can't be all of it. Because you notice like there's such a thing as religious pluralism, and you're like, so everybody else has it wrong. Like all of the somehow I was lucky enough to be born into the one right religion, and everybody else just got it wrong. So at first I opened up to, well, maybe everybody's kind of right and everybody's kind of wrong. And eventually I just sort of grew, and I got to a point where I just had to admit it to myself. Like I was just like, you don't really believe this. Like you're trying, and maybe there's parts of it that you want to be true, but you don't really believe this is true. And that's when I sort of started calling myself an atheist, when I accepted what I think I had always sort of known, that I never really truly believed it. It always seemed, the parts of it that I liked, which was mostly like eternal life. I like the idea of an afterlife. People die and then you get to see them again. That's a nice thought. But, as much as I wanted that to be true, I never really believed that that was true. And at a certain point, I just had to admit it and say, you don't believe this. You're an atheist,
Yeah. How did you start doing YouTube? What brought you to that?
It had to do with atheism. There was a guy who used to do YouTube videos. I don't think he posts anymore, but he had a channel, I think under the name Veritas 48. And he posted a video called Questions for Atheists. And it wasn't like an adversarial thing.
That guy.
Yeah. And he was different than a lot of the other Christians because he didn't seem like he was trying to start a fight or trying to do like a gotcha, because a lot of times when like a religious person would post a video like that, it would be a challenge. It would be like, explain this, atheist, and he wasn't doing that. His question seemed more like, why don't you believe? And, like kind of some of the questions you've asked me, like when did you grow up in a religious home, and when did you start to doubt, and that sort of thing. And I thought, this is kind of interesting. He seems like he's just curious and he just wants to start a conversation. So my first YouTube video was a response to that video where I gave my answers to his 5 questions. And I've said before, like, it's interesting that it's one of the only response videos I've ever made. Like once I started doing regular YouTube videos, I almost never do response videos. I always do my own original stuff. And I never do like one of those where let's watch this other person's video and pause it and make jokes and point out why they're wrong. I've never done that kind of video. And I rarely do videos that are specifically meant to answer back to someone else's video. But the first one I ever did was exactly that. I was answering someone else's video. And I just liked it. I just thought, if I worked at it, I might actually someday not be terrible at this. And eventually I'll get there. I mean, eventually I'll not be terrible at it. So.
Well, you've done, 2,700 videos so far?
Something like that. Yeah.
When I ask you, what's your favorite video? What's the first one that comes to your mind?
Oh boy, it's probably one of the stuffy videos. It's probably one of the less viewed ones. I mean, I did a stuffy video I think 2 years ago now that was like it was a takeoff on the movie Rashomon, where one of the stuffed animal characters broke my favorite coffee mug, and they all had completely irreconcilable stories about how it happened. And I was really pleased with how that turned out. I thought it turned out really funny and gave me a chance to have a little bit of fun with the format of those videos, as they typically are. And if I absolutely had to pick one, it would probably be that one. Although I also did a Star Trek video, I think last year, where the format was I was an apparently crooked police detective who was addressing the camera as though the camera was like the person I was interviewing. And the question was, which Star Trek show ruined the Borg? And the different shows were suspects. And I was like, obviously trying to steer them toward a particular conclusion. So I was like a dirty cop talking to the viewer, trying to nudge them toward the conclusion I wanted them to take. And that was fun. So
that sounds like fun.
Yeah.
If anyone was going to start a YouTube channel now, what kind of advice would you give them?
Start 10 years ago.
It's exactly. When I said to someone recently, someone congratulated me on getting 100,000 subscribers, and I said, yeah, I wish I had done it 10 years ago, because back then it actually meant something. Like now, I mean, it doesn't. I'm happy about it. Like it doesn't mean nothing to me, but it means a lot less now than it used to. But yeah, go back in time and start 10 or 15 years ago, and you'll be doing a lot better today. Most of the advice I have for people is just technical stuff. It's just, make sure you have a decent camera, make sure you have good lighting, and beyond that, it's just the sort of advice I would give to anybody who wants to be a writer, which is figure out what you want to say, figure out why you want to do this. Why do you want to make YouTube videos? What do you have to say? What do you want to talk about?
What's your
format
angle? Sustainable? Like, is it something you can do week after week after week?
Exactly. Is it just going to be you just shooting your mouth off for no reason? Is there a particular angle you have? Is there a particular message you want to get out? Figure out what you want to do. And then don't be afraid to change. Don't be afraid to make adjustments. Be prepared to not be good at it at first. Be willing to do, some videos that aren't going to be up to your standards until you get good at it. Like when I first started doing it, I could not speak extemporaneously on camera to save my life. It wasn't that I was nervous. It was just that I could not think of anything to say. I had an idea when I first started my channel. I thought, well, I'll just print out like some news stories and set the camera up somewhere, and I'll just talk to the camera about what I think about these stories. And I tried it, and for the life of me, I could not get more than 3 or 4 sentences out without having to stop and go, oh, I couldn't think of anything to say. And gradually, I just got better at it. And I also got better at doing scripted videos where I could talk to the camera from a script that I had written and not sound like I was making a hostage video, where it sounded natural. You just get better at it. You just get better at it. And you just, that's what you have to do. So figure out what you want to say, be willing to be bad at it before you get good at it, and yeah, make sure you have the best equipment that you can afford. I mean, don't go into debt over it if it's just something you want to do for fun. But try to make the videos look and sound the best that you can make them look and sound, and be prepared to catch some hell for it if you say controversial things, or even if you don't say controversial things, because
be prepared to catch some hell because it's YouTube.
Yeah, and YouTube, and unless you get super duper successful, YouTube probably won't have your back all that much. Like they give you tools to manage it yourself, and that's basically it. It's like, well, just if you get nasty comments, delete the comment. I mean, I agree. Yeah. I think you should do that, but be prepared to have to handle it yourself.
I think you're completely spot on, and people just aren't prepared on how much they're going to suck at first.
Yeah.
At anything new creatively.
Yeah, there's
at
always
least that's
be...
the excuse we're going with for this episode. Because
and also self-deprecation really helps. Like if you because nobody knows how to make fun of you better than you know how to make fun of yourself, unless you're just like a raving egomaniac and you honestly don't see your own flaws. But I think for most people that's not true, especially for YouTube people. Actually, most of the people on YouTube that I get along with and I really like that are more successful than I am are a lot more self-loathing than I am. Like I feel like that's something that I haven't quite caught up to. Like I'm very self-critical, and I can look at things and go like, oh, why'd you do that? Or I wish I had that to do over. But I don't hate my own work. Like I think I usually do a pretty good job, but there are some folks who do a way better job than I do who are like, oh, I hate myself. And I'm like, but why? You're so great. It seems like that's a prerequisite to have success.
Maybe.
Well, there's a thing. I think that this gets into something that Andy talks about a lot with entertainers having that need to fill a void.
Yeah.
Oh yeah. Well, what helps me is that I don't think I suck as much as my work sucks. And maybe that helps depersonalize the suckage. I don't know. But that's what I'm going to go with.
Yeah, I know. Like with me, it's I notice things that thankfully most other people don't notice. Like there'll be a particular beat in a video that I think is awkward, where I think, oh, I could have said that better, or I screwed that up, and and my wife will watch the video and say, I think it's fine. And it's, yeah, but I know it.
See,
and
the
like
thing
someone else
that-
is going to see it
the
eventually.
thing that works for me is to like watch is just watch other stuff and pick that out in other people's stuff, not like to criticize them, that just to be like, oh, that happens, like
Yeah.
watch somebody way more. Like the other day I caught like a weird move in an episode of Sesame Street I was watching with my daughter, and I was just like, that was a weird camera thing and you shouldn't have done it that way. And I was just,
Yeah, I'm the same way. I'm the same way. You'll pick things out, and you're like, why did they do that? Why didn't they cut that out? And yeah, you do. Sometimes you feel a little better about yourself. You're like, oh, I'm not the only one who screws
somebody
everything
who's
up.
like actually successful doing this is making the same mistake every once in a while. Cool.
Right, exactly.
So, see, we're heading down towards the end of our conversation. Our last question that we like to ask our guests is there a topic you wanted us to ask you about? Is there something you wanted to wax philosophically about but didn't get a chance to? This is your chance. And we're not talking about plugs and where people can find you online, but in general, is there a question you wanted us to ask you but it never occurred?
I'm always bitterly disappointed whenever anybody interviews me and I'm not asked about professional wrestling.
So,
To tie it into some other things we've talked about. I've been a wrestling fan my whole life, and I've realized as an adult that the value of being a wrestling fan and of being really, really into it, as I have been for many years, is that as long as you are a little bit self-aware, you can't be a snob about anything. If you know that you are also a huge wrestling fan, because so it really keeps you centered and keeps you grounded. Because I do videos, I do movie reviews. The other podcast I co-host is a movie review podcast, and it's easy. And there's a lot of that on the internet of people who are sort of self-made critics and just come across as very snobby and this sucks and this sucks and this sucks and I would be so much better at it. And I never want to be that way myself. And one of the ways that I can sort of balance myself is to remind myself, you're like a huge wrestling fan. So your taste isn't that refined. You're not that smart. You're not that sophisticated. I
think like my one buddy Wonka, who's really into wrestling, he would say that, wrestling is the Shakespeare of our day. Like he'll go down that road.
That's more of an indictment of our day, really. I've loved it. I've loved it since I was a little kid. I've always loved wrestling. And I would even say there are times when it really grabs me, when I legitimately am just so hooked emotionally on a particular match, or I'm so invested in a particular result that it's like a really good movie, or a really good drama where I'm just there, and or even a real sport, like if you're watching like a baseball game and you really want your team to win and it's getting down to the wire and you're just like, ugh, like it's that kind of thing. But yeah, I feel like it's a little bit of a stretch to compare it to Shakespeare.
Everybody was going to watch Shakespeare. They were like, shitting in the alley. So
in that way, actually, most wrestling fans might be a little bit above that at this point, which is encouraging. I don't think they're shitting in the alleys. But yeah, so it keeps me very centered, and it gives me something that when it's good and I'm liking it, that I can enjoy and be satisfied with, that you don't have to think about too much, that is very simple. Wrestling is best when it's presented very formulaically. My wife and I were talking about it recently, and she actually had a good point that it's kind of like farce. I won't compare wrestling to Shakespeare, but I'll compare it to farce. Because for farce to work, it has to be very highly structured, and it usually follows a very specific formula. So if you know the formula, you can predict what's going to happen next, and it's all about the execution, and it's all about the personalities of the individual performers, and that's what differentiates one wrestling angle or one wrestling match from another, and that's what differentiates one farce from another, and that's what determines whether it's good or whether it's bad. Do they stick to the formula and do they execute it? And there's something very pleasing about that to me as an English student and as a creative person, and just as someone who likes to watch something and get involved in it. So yeah, it's a very low pursuit. It's a very low form of art, but that's what I like about it.
Well, that's great. I think that's a great place to end. Steve Shives, thanks for coming on the Naked Dino. This was a great conversation.
Yeah, this is fun.
I agree. Thank you so much for having me, you two.
So where can people find you online?
You can find me on YouTube if you just go to youtube.com/Steve Shives, and you can see more of me than you could ever want. And the podcasts I mentioned, I co-host a couple of podcasts with Jason Harding, the Late Seating podcast, which is our movie review podcast, and the Ensign's Log, which is the Star Trek themed comedy podcast that we do. And you can hear those both at lemmylistenpodcasts.com.
Fantastic. Well, thanks again, man. And congratulations once again on hitting 100,000.
Thank you very much. I appreciate it. And thanks for having me on.
No, thanks,
Oh,
man.
yeah,
That's
thanks.
fun.
All right, and then we'll just cut it there, I guess. Oh, I had this
Cool.
in my ear, and it's crazy.